Hello, and thank you for attending today's Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Applications Artificial Intelligence Powering Business Solutions webinar. Feel free to get social during the presentation on Twitter using the hashtag MSDynApps. At the end of the webinar, you'll find information about the speakers you'll be hearing from today. We also invite you to watch our previous webinars. So with that, I'd like to introduce our host for today, author and president of Social-Centered Selling, Barbara Giamanco. Barb, you have the floor.
Thank you, James, and welcome back, everyone, to another Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Applications webinar. Very excited about today's topic. We've got two great guest experts to talk with us about artificial intelligence powering business solutions, but we're also going to be talking about how artificial intelligence impacts not only business, but people as employees, consumers, and citizens. So I'm very excited about the topic today. No doubt about it, artificial intelligence is hot. We hear the conversation around how that's going to support us in business and in life in many different scenarios. So organizations are thinking about how they're going to use artificial intelligence technologies like robotics and expert systems and machine learning. And then there's also how this is going to impact us as people, as employees, as buyers ourselves, and even as citizens. So I'm delighted to be welcoming my guest experts today, Brad Power, who is principal at Maxos, and Leslie Gaines-Ross, who is the chief reputation strategist at Weber Shandwick. So before we get started with the conversation today, I'm going to have each of our guests briefly introduce themselves. So Brad, welcome, and let's start with you.
Thanks, Barb. I'm a principal at Maxos, which is an organization that looks at digital futures and how large organizations can innovate using technology. I come at this from a background in business reengineering, which I worked on actively in the 1990s with Michael Hammer. I've also done work in process improvement through lean transformation, working with the Lean Enterprise Institute. And I've been focused recently on continuous delivery and more advanced and continuous ways of innovation and change at organizations.
Excellent. Very excited to have you here, and your expertise certainly speaks for itself, Brad, so welcome. And Leslie, welcome to the broadcast, and let's hear from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, and thank you for inviting me. I'm the Chief Reputation Strategist at Weber Shandwick, which is a global public relations firm. And my expertise is in all things reputation, CEO, company, industry reputation. But I also do a lot of thought leadership for the firm on topics ranging from civility to social CEOs and to AI, artificial intelligence. And I guess you would say that I'll be representing the people today and tell you about that. And I started because of my concern about the reputation of artificial intelligence out there in the wide world.
Excellent. Your research is fascinating, and I know our guests are really going to enjoy hearing more about that. So let's get started with the conversation then, shall we?
Great. So if I could kick off on artificial intelligence and why it's important today, I heard an interesting definition, which is artificial intelligence is anything we don't expect computers to be able to do. So one definition is it's magic. And we used to have algorithms that, for example, do claims processing in organizations, and that might have been magic to previous generations, but now we assume that's the kind of thing that companies can do. And so artificial intelligence is a lot of the things that surprise us that we don't expect computers to do, like autonomous driving. And I think it's important today, and I wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review about AI at the tipping point, and I think it's powered by, of course, the processing power in Moore's Law and the ability to do more clever things with lower cost and more computing power. And it's also being driven by the explosion of data, because artificial intelligence needs lots of data to do analysis, and that's coming from sensors being embedded also at low expense, the Internet of Things, big data and analytics. So I look at it from the business impact standpoint. You can see a lot of application areas, which we'll discuss further, but marketing and sales, the ability to personalize interactions with individuals, and logistics, supply chain, and just doing things in a more granular and detailed way that used to be done in a sort of broad basis of averages.
Yeah, I think that's a great lead-off, Brad, and I really appreciate that. I think often people may think of, and Leslie, I think you're going to probably speak to this, that people often think of, first thing I think of when I thought of artificial intelligence is based on some of the things I've seen in movies, right? We tend to think of it as all about the robots. But so Leslie, let's move to you. What are your thoughts on this? What is it you've learned about artificial intelligence in terms of some of the research work you've done, and why is it important today, do you think?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd start with how this all came about. We started looking into the whole topic of artificial intelligence and what people thought about it, and we found that there was next to nothing, really next to nothing, where the average person was asked a question in this day and age about what they think about it. And we were so taken aback, we said, okay, we've got to really go out there and find out. And instead of just listening to all these people who are all talking about it, what does the average Joe or Jane think? So we surveyed about 2,100 consumers. We also surveyed marketers, but mostly I'll be talking about the consumers in 5 different markets in the U.S., Canada, UK, China, Brazil, and said, what comes to mind when you think about artificial intelligence, just off the top of your head? And like you said, the top response, 22% of people said robots. So people think robots when they think artificial intelligence. And they think other things. They said the Jetsons, convenience, self-driving cars, smart homes, smart factories. So people had a sense, but not a narrow sense, of what artificial intelligence really is all about. And I thought that was fascinating because in a report that I did read from Stanford, they talked about, it's called the 100-Year Study, they said maybe it's a good thing that we don't have a precise definition right now. Maybe the fact that it's not a universally accepted definition lets us broaden what artificial intelligence will mean in the future. And I thought that was helpful because I remember back when social media first surfaced, I was like, well, what's included in social media? Is that digital? Is it not digital? So artificial intelligence for many people today is about robots.
Interesting. Well, now, Brad, I'm just curious because the way that I came to meet you was I did read your article in Harvard Business Review. You were talking about artificial intelligence in business. And you mentioned that we're going to talk more about hype, but you mentioned that you felt we were probably at a tipping point. You think that's true now? We're really at that tipping point where people are really going to, people as individuals, but also inside organizations and the organizations themselves. Are we at a point where we're really ready to embrace artificial intelligence, do you think?
Well, yes, for a variety of perspectives. One is this notion that software is eating the world. So things are becoming more and more automated, or software is taking over what used to be done manually by people. And so the AI sits on top of a lot of those processes and a lot of that data, and the way I look at it is it's a turbocharger. So if you believe in business intelligence, big data, and analytics, AI is just a multiplier on those trends that are already underway. And so where if you look back, and people who followed this AI have talked about a lot of winters and springs in AI, and I remember back in the 80s, I was associated with a company was called Applied Expert Systems, and it tried to take all the knowledge out of, say, a doctor prescribing for cancer or something, and it would encapsulate in that a bunch of rules, if this, then that. And that was very time-consuming, and it was very extensive, but what happened is that machine learning came along, and Google did something like they took a bunch of images and then the machine figured out which ones are the cats. So there's this ability to do pattern recognition where the machine does it itself. It doesn't require this laborious introduction of rules and algorithms. So that is accelerating. So it's kind of both the context is improving, as I said before, the processing, the data, but then also the AI itself is shifting from this what was expert systems to this more automated approach to the machines learning for themselves. So you've got a double effect almost. It's a multiplier. And that's what puts us over the edge into a tipping point.
Excellent. And then you're going to talk about this in a lot more detail, Leslie, but certainly from your research, it seems that we've kind of hit a tipping point on the people side where we're much more accepting of artificial intelligence showing up in different facets of our lives, yes?
Absolutely. I was really surprised when in our survey the respondents, only 8%, that's really a little number, said that it's science fiction. And that it was never going to become a reality. So the opposite of that is that 92% expect it to be here or it has already arrived. So I think the average person, like Brad was saying, recognizes that it's here to stay. And in our survey, we did find that people are, and we'll talk about it later, but they're accepting. They're willing to accept it into their lives for the most part.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the next question, which is all going to be about the upsides and downsides for business and society with respect to artificial intelligence. All right, so Brad, I'm going to have you lead off on this one. What are some of the positives, those upsides, and then what are some of the things that might be a bit of a downside when you're thinking about how artificial intelligence is going to impact business and even the employees working in businesses? What's your perspective on that?
Well, the dynamic and the driver is that anything that's routine can be automated and will be. There are just so many positive things that happen when you take something and put it into software. If you take the algorithms and the mechanical steps that people do and you turn that into just a routine that's in software. To illustrate that, I've been studying DevOps. I don't know if people have heard of it, but it's a software development technique which combines development and operations. So historically, if you build software, an engineer or programmer codes up some software and then hands it over to a group or lobs it over the wall to a group that does quality assurance and then puts it into production. And they tend to batch things, and it tends to take a long time for that testing to make sure that it doesn't break the systems while it's doing it. But what has happened over time in DevOps is that all those things that were the manual steps, were the quality assurance and the operations things that took something into production, have been automated. And what that means is that instead of taking a matter of weeks, it can take a matter of minutes, so that a developer can push a button and so something goes right into production. And so the joke is DevOps means dev no ops. So the creative activity, the development, the writing, that remains. But everything that was administrative and testing and what have you, all that gets automated. So the people that used to do ops now build testing systems and integration systems. They don't actually do manual steps. So if you take that lens and you apply it generally to any process, because I'm a process engineer, then you say, what's the creative part that should stay, and then let's automate all the other stuff away. So if you're a marketing person, come up with a creative ad, push a button, and it immediately goes into production on the right channels. Wherever there are things that can be automated, automate them. And what that means is that there was a panel where, for example, there was somebody from Google and from one of the major banks, I think it was Citibank, and the person from Google, they were talking about all this automation, and the person from Citibank says, we have 100,000 people doing all this administrative work. And the person from Google says, if I managed your operation, it would take 10,000 people. And you can just imagine it if you think about claims processing. If you put enough automation and AI against it, right now it might be 70% automated and 30% manual. But if Google managed it, it would be 100% automated. And so things that can be automated will be, and what that means is Citibank, which used to have 100,000 people, will eventually have 10,000 people. So that was 90,000 people who just got freed up. So if you're among those 90,000 people, your job just went away. Well, that's kind of probably a downside. And for society, it might be an upside because things are happening faster. If you're a consumer, if you're looking at it from the perspective of a consumer, all those services that used to take weeks to get enhanced now get enhanced in minutes. And so the cycles of improvement are much faster, and then you get better quality products because they're constantly evolving. They're not waiting for annual batch cycles to get updated. So consumers benefit a lot. People who are caught in the crosshairs of an automated task, of a task that can be easily automated, they aren't so happy. And maybe we can get on to later then what are the survivable jobs that are rise above those tasks that can be automated. But the winning and losing depends on where you're looking from, either as a consumer, and I think Leslie will get into perhaps society, or whether you're one of those people in the job that's getting automated away.
Well, and in the example that you just gave, Brad, I also see that there's a positive there in the sense that you mentioned Citibank and the 100,000 people could, go to 10,000. I think it's also pretty likely that people who are freed up from a lot of these routine tasks that can now be automated through artificial intelligence, doesn't that present opportunities for people to work on other things that would bring maybe more creative and innovative ways of doing business to the organization? It's not a complete downside, do you think?
No, the people that work with machines are both highly valued and have more creative work. But it almost comes back to, I've worked with companies that I'll remain nameless, but it was an insurance company that had a very strong market share, almost a monopoly position. And so change is something that people avoided, but people came and did a very good job from 9 to 5 every day in working with 7 very difficult systems to integrate on behalf of customers, let's say. And that was a job that they enjoyed and that they enjoy. And it's a very structured job, and it may have existed into the past and may exist into the future. And those same people have asked to take a job where every day you show up and you have something different to do. You and I, who are change-loving, might say, that's great. I like to be in that environment. Some other people might say, no, I kind of like this structuredness and consistency and mastery that I get in a job that's very stable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Leslie, what are your thoughts on what are some of the positives and maybe some of those things that are going to be perceived as downsides related to artificial intelligence? What showed up in your survey data?
Yeah, I'm talking about the survey data because it is illustrative of what people are thinking. And I will say I was very, very surprised by the findings. I expected that consumers would be anxious and worried and concerned about AI, but actually what we found was the opposite. We found that consumers were 6 times more likely to see AI's impact on society as positive than negative. And they were even more so, 7 times more likely to see the impact on their personal, everyday lives as positive than negative. So we asked them in the survey gave them a list of different examples, and they said, AI, and at the top of the list, they said AI can help take on tasks that are too dangerous for people. It was like 72% of people said that. Or nearly 70% say it's going to help me save time, which is important. Or it's going to give me greater access to news and information. It's going to be more convenient. So there were real positives in terms of people's thinking. People were, like half of the consumers we spoke to said it's going to help us better preserve our energy and natural resources. Something like that made me very pleased because I thought, that's true, and that's a terrific benefit of AI if we can really have a positive impact on the environment and that people are thinking that way. But, of course, like everything, there are upsides and there are downsides, and there are definitely concerns about AI. And that, too, was extremely interesting because the highest on the list of what would be a downside of AI, and really high, 9 out of 10 consumers said criminal use, the sense that maybe AI would lead to greater criminal use of the technology or impact people. Cyber attacks and hacking, 90% said that's a downside. They're concerned about that. And every day we hear about another hacking or cyber attack. So even though we see benefits, there are definitely concerns. Job losses also, of course, came up. Concern that machines would make bad choices and be harmful. And also high on the list, and certainly something that's very topical today, 88% said companies or governments would have access to personal data. So there is that whole privacy concern that people are aware of. I mean, overall, it was very encouraging to me to see that people were seeing the balance, were positive as well as concerned, but they're ready to greet AI in many ways if it can really make their lives better. The one thing I do want to add, though, which is of concern, and I'm sure it'll come up near the end, is that people, for the most part, the 1/4 of the consumers we interviewed, which was the lowest on the list, thought that AI would be able to address social inequality. So essentially, there is a concern that AI is going to drive wealth to certain groups and lower social equality for many. So I think that is one of the downsides that we do have to be concerned about, that it's not just going to land in the hands. All this technology is not just going to benefit one segment of society.
Both good points you've both made. So let's go ahead and move forward then. Now, I've been around technology a long, long time, so have you, Brad, and certainly there's, a lot of hype. I see a lot of people talking about artificial intelligence, and it's showing up in many different places and many different topical business discussions. I think, Brad, you may have even mentioned to me that 90% of startups today are including the term as part of their pitch. Clearly, people are, trying to tag on to the term. So let's start with your thoughts on this. How does an organization separate the hype from the real potential that artificial intelligence can bring to the business?
Well, I'm sure it's high on the hype cycle, as you've mentioned. And what I'm seeing is that it's maybe, as I mentioned, a turbocharger for a lot of other things. So we're in an unprecedented time. If you look at the late 90s, and there was the rise of the Internet as just one major technology change that was rolling through the way that work was done. Today we have social, mobile, big data, analytics, the Internet of Things, micro this and micro that, and AI sort of sits on top of it. So as a way to package a lot of what is Internet of Things, big data, analytics, artificial intelligence is this way that it shows. Those are technologies. Artificial intelligence is a technology as well, but it just in the name, and with those images of robots, it conjures up making better decisions. And making better decisions, more accurate decisions, more profitable decisions, more consistent and reliable decisions, that's a lot closer to a business benefit, whereas big data or analytics, I guess analytics would be similar. They seem a little bit more like technologies and removed from the business processes and the ways that things would be improved. So I think that the hype is partly because it's latching onto this artificial intelligence is latching onto and encapsulating a number of major technology forces that are rolling through the economy and that organizations are looking at to see how they can benefit. As I've mentioned, things like personalization and things like manage your supply chain better.
Excellent. Your thoughts on this, Leslie?
I agree with Brad that there's hype around artificial intelligence, but I do think that it's gotten closer to reality than we even realize. And we did find that in our study that many of the consumers think it's already here and they're optimistic and want it to accelerate. Very few actually wanted it to stop altogether. But I think that one of the ways to manage the hype is to work with the sources of information about AI that people trust. And we actually asked that question to find out, well, maybe who do they trust? Who's going to give them the real news on AI that they can really depend upon? And this also really surprised me. First of all, they said the personal experience. So any of this, the Alexa or any of the conversational computer system is a personal way of experiencing AI. And then here's another thing that was very high on the list, which in this day and age really surprised me, makes me happy, is that people say they trust the technology experts' opinion and academics to give them the real lowdown on AI. So in a world where there's almost a demise of experts going on out there, I think it was encouraging news to think that academics and experts are trusted as good sources, and professional product reviews like Consumer Reports. So I think that the hype can be diminished somewhat by making sure that these voices get heard and people get the real background and briefing on AI. So I think we can manage the hype from getting too out of control, and we have the right sources. And it's nice to know that people who know what's going on will be looked upon favorably.
I absolutely agree with that, Leslie. I think the thing I would say, though, is as I've at least seen through my experience with technology, and Brad may have some thoughts on this as well, I do think that you still have to be careful and vet your experts. Academics, certainly, that's one thing, but certainly anybody who starts showing up and starts to build themselves as an artificial intelligence expert, if you will, I think you need to be sure that you're vetting them carefully, that they really do have the background and experience, because you're right, we need the information to come from those trusted sources. Brad, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that before I move us along, but curious to know what you think.
Well, I think it's a general trust. I don't know how much this has to do with artificial intelligence, but just a general trust in all the information that's now easily available. We could get into politics here, which we should probably avoid, but and these things called fake news and so on, that there's so many more sources. And one of the potential roles which we could talk about, which is a little more futuristic, is sort of a robot, but not a robot in the sense of a physical being that looks like a human, but maybe an agent. And intelligent agents, I think, will be increasingly looking out for you, knowing your interests, looking at stuff, information that might be out there, and doing a little bit more of the filtering and curating based on trustworthy sources.
Excellent. All right, well, let's go ahead and move along and talk about some of the business and consumer applications. We've talked about some of these, but I want to get into that in a little more depth.
Right. There are so many that we could go through. Let me just choose two that are things that we can all relate to as consumers. I've mentioned a couple times marketing and sales and personalization. There's real foment going on, and one of the ways I like to think about it is you think about Mad Men and the show where there's sort of Madison Avenue product managers and advertising people, and they come together and they come up with a great ad that gets broadcast out on TV and in magazines. It's a mass message sent through a mass publication in a big batch. And nowadays, it's all shifted to people on their personal devices using social media, and ads are coming right to them as individuals. So it's one-to-one marketing. And that's revolutionary for us as consumers, and it's very revolutionary for the marketing and sales activities, because the skills that used to be all about creative and then maybe buying ad space have now become very digital. You're managing engines that are deciding what messages should go to what people in real time, because I've just looked at the New York Times on my mobile device, and up pops an ad that's tailored presumably to me, and it's to me alone. And that happened in milliseconds based on some algorithm somewhere. So the kind of disruption of marketing and sales in terms of the skills that are needed is pretty profound. I'm about to publish an article on, for example, a company that is not only so AI is not only being applied in each of the channels that might be a brand would be using, like search engine optimization, Facebook, email, but they've now put an AI on top of all of those, so it's figuring out which messages and which combinations to which demographics, through which channels, what wording, et cetera, are having the biggest impact. And they're also doing pattern recognition to say, those customers who are buying our products look like this. Let me find other customers who have that same profile. It's kind of like back to that story I was telling about the machine can recognize through a set of visual images, it can recognize cats. Well, if it can recognize a pattern of these are the people that have bought from us before, who else looks like that, then let me feed messages to them. So the machine can figure out how to do that and find patterns that humans would never do, or never at that level of sophistication, so it can come up with new things. And then just, in a similar way in healthcare, personalized health. So the idea that that care is going to be personalized to you based on your genomics, based on all the other omics, that on average this drug might work for most people, but because of your family history and genetics and whatever, it actually doesn't work for you, but this one does. The notion of personalized medicine is huge. And then just, in healthcare as well, the notion you can quickly see of imaging. Right now there are radiologists who look at images, CAT scans, and MRIs, and X-rays, and so on. But a machine can look at all those pixels and figure out the patterns, and will only get smarter over time and be able to do what radiologists used to do. For a period there may be augmentation, but eventually those radiologists are going to train the machines to do as good or better a job than humans. So those are just a couple of big application areas, marketing and sales, and in healthcare.
And so you mentioned marketing and sales, and I think you said earlier in the conversation, Brad, you also mentioned operations. So certainly a lot of operations. I'm thinking like supply chain as an example. I'm thinking artificial intelligence would be a benefit there too as well, correct?
Of course, yes. Supply chain, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. The fact that you can order from Amazon and it tells you exactly where things are all the time, that's pretty amazing. Just to choose another simple example, legal discovery. There are a lot of documents that need to be run through before a trial can be held. What is the legal precedent? What's all that? So that legal discovery process is something that many administrative people had to go through documents and do search. Now, and it might take weeks, and now an AI can do that in minutes, going through all the documents and pulling them together and making inferences about what are relevant and so on. So, there are more processes than not that when you apply this notion of what could an AI do that lead you to these kind of revolutionary approaches to how that same process could be managed.
Excellent. Well, let's how does this show up for consumers? You mentioned things like Alexa. You both mentioned the self-driving cars. What are some of the other applications you're seeing from the consumer point of view that AI is going to be useful for?
Well, we definitely ask those questions, and again, I would say consumers are pretty optimistic about some of these incredible benefits that they see. At the top of, looking through a rank list, certainly that it's going to have tremendous benefits in healthcare. So AI is going to help people, remind them to take their medicine. It's going to help them help with medical procedures, health advice, like Brad said, medical diagnosis. Also, they see a lot of benefits in the automotive area, travel directions, mechanics, someone fixing their car, driving a car, trucking, delivery, entertainment, a topic that is a huge topic. Everyone's into culture and entertainment, and they see a lot of applications there, certainly in terms of better entertainment, maybe video games, and just ways to enjoy life, travel and tourism, financial services, administrative tasks, like you said, like legal advice and so forth. Where they don't necessarily see the benefits of AI is in things like the military. Do we want to have all these robots fighting our wars, or actually performing a medical procedure, although there are medical procedures that are already automated. Making a medical diagnosis, I think I agree that AI can do wonders and already is, but people seem to think I want that human touch. And people aren't so sure about AI providing any kind of childcare or babysitting, although they do see AI, and I think this is an important application, as providing companionship to the elderly. I mean, as our population ages around the world, and we have this entire senior population, how can AI benefit those people in terms of being a companion, helping with their medical advice, helping with them, making sure they take the medicine that's been prescribed to them. So I think some of these things already exist, but consumers seem to see a lot of ways that AI can help make their lives easier and better.
Now, Leslie, also, let's talk about the child care for a moment, because I think you said overall child care wasn't necessarily an area that people saw AI supporting them. However, there does seem to be one generational group that was more open to that. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, younger people were more, and millennials are more open to that, and that makes sense because they've probably been brought up on iPads and computers and automated everything already, so I think they see the applications in front of them because they're a product of it. But I still think that that's where people are most hesitant is, I'm going to hire a robot to watch over my child or to give me advice. Not so sure.
Yeah. Well, that may change in time. All right, so let's go ahead and move ahead. Let's talk a little bit more. We'll talk about how employees and management are going to be impacted in the workforce. I think there are definitely upsides and a few downsides that we started to talk about earlier. So let's jump ahead.
Yeah,
all right, so Brad, I'm going to lead off with you on this particular one. What are some of your thoughts based on the work that you've been doing? You talked earlier about a lot of the routine tasks are really going to impact employees. We didn't talk so much about management yet, but what's your perspective on this particular question?
Yeah, right. So we've already covered that if you're an employee and performing a routine task, whether that's working in a warehouse on an assembly line or doing an administrative task that's pretty rote. If you're, for example, in a call center and you're answering a question, historically there were people that answered the question, what's the balance on my account? And now that's been solved by a IVR that you click, to get your account, push 3, and the machine tells you what your account balance is. those IVRs will get more and more sophisticated so that, and what I'm seeing repeatedly is that if you take the frequently asked questions, so you know that when people call in, they ask these 8 questions, and we listen to our best call center agents, and this is how they answer those questions. The machine can observe that, particularly if it's something like text and it's chat, but increasingly with natural language processing, they can recognize it from voice. Then they can infer what are the best answers. So, 80% of the questions the machine may be able to answer, do it consistently, accurately to the best standard, and then the 20% will to those same questions to get bounced to. So the job of anyone who is for the more complex questions, there's still time for you, but you're going to be training the system to even take those away. Anyone who works with machines is in a good place. Now, for management, management in most organizations is that middle layer that's communicating strategic objectives from the top to the front line, or taking concerns and issues from the front line and escalating them to the top. All of those communications can happen through technology. And maybe it's not AI, but maybe it is. Maybe that's making decisions about what things you escalate and what things you don't. But again, getting back to my research on the ideal organization based on software, the thing you see at a company like Amazon is what they call a two-pizza team. So you have autonomous teams that are small, let's say 3 to 7 people, and they're responsible for some activity, and they're as independent as possible, that whatever component they're managing is as independent as possible, and the overhead of coordination between those teams is handled as much as possible, again, through technology, not through meetings, not through management, not through getting together. So over time, management, I think, will like routine work, management work will move to software, and the AI will be taking care of some of that as well.
So that would sort of suggest that people who are in these kinds of positions where some of that work is definitely going to be automated, they need to start thinking about the skills they're going to need going into the future, don't you think, Brad?
That's exactly right. That you either have to move upstream or you have to be working with the machines, designing and helping them do that routine work that you used to do so it can happen with the beauty of software, which is efficiently, in real time, 24/7, and easy to change.
Great. Any thoughts on this for me, Leslie?
Yeah. Well, I'll speak first from the research and then tell you also something I think about it. But in the research, like 65%, nearly 2/3 of the consumers said that they expect that AI will replace their jobs, at least partially. So that is where there definitely is concern. And one of our consumers, because we had an open end, said that there are, however, situations where you need emotional intelligence, and that the most adequate response is not logical. And their opinion is that machines don't necessarily have emotions. I think that social skills are going to be more important than ever. Persuasion, emotional intelligence, teaching others, and that employers and workplaces are going to be valuing in the future, despite how great AI is and all the productivity and efficiency it's going to lend, are going to value a lot of those character skills like perseverance and sociability and adaptive behavior. And one of the areas of my expertise and reputation is leadership, and it's all about a lot about CEO reputation. And I have to say that when it comes down to it in communications, you can automate the heck out of everything, but what people always want is that personal touch, that human touch. People, employees, from the research I've done, want the CEOs to show up. They want to see them face-to-face, interact with them, and it makes the ultimate difference. And we can also see, what we may find in the future is that face-to-face is going to be the most precious competitive asset that people have, and we also see what a difference the right leadership can make in terms of a company's reputation and building a great place to work and a great culture and developing new and innovative products. So as much as AI is the jewel of the future, I think the leadership and the social nature of human beings is not going to be forsaken and nor ever going to go away. And we could also, it's not inconceivable to me that we will see a backlash against all of this non-human touch. And so it's something just to think about, that we still have to build that into all the communications and interactions that we're so excited to see that AI is offering.
Excellent. All right, well, let's go ahead and move forward. Now, Leslie, you've talked about the research that you've done and how the average person is thinking about how artificial intelligence will impact them. What I'd like to do is build on something you just said a moment ago, which is, I believe you said 65% do expect artificial intelligence to replace their job or some aspect of their job. So what do you know, certainly that's going to be an impact, and Brad and I started talking about that as well, but what do you think people need to start doing for themselves now to prepare for that? Because when I think about artificial intelligence and replacing jobs, that seems to me like it's very similar all throughout our history as, you know, industrial age machines came in and people started doing things differently, and then technology came in. So this feels like the next advancement. But what are your thoughts around what people should do now to start preparing themselves?
I think that training, education is upping your skills, understanding technology. Many of the things that we've been talking about on this webinar are what's in order for people. I think that a lot of certain kinds of jobs will go away. On the other hand, there's a possibility that human ingenuity will create new jobs, and that it's not going to be the age of killer robots and robots gone rogue, and that new ideas will come up and spring up and create whole new industries. I mean, there was a time when people, I think, thought that social media was going to change everything to the extent that everyone would, you know, have to lose people. So many people would lose their jobs, and it's been remarkable if you think about all the creative burst of ideas that have occurred. So I think that training, staying on top of where technology is going, reflecting on new ideas is going to be very important, and I think it's going to be increasingly important for the younger generation. And in our survey, they're the ones who are the most worried about their jobs being replaced. So they have a lot on their plate.
Awesome. Anything you would like to add to that, Brad?
Yeah, well, we've talked about the average person as an employee and the impact on them, but I think we should also continue to look at the average person as a consumer, and I think they should be having a pretty positive relationship to that. You know, Amazon gives us recommendations on if you like this, other people bought that. Netflix gives recommendations. If you like this, then you'll like that. I heard a presentation from Reed Hastings where he said that the CEO of Netflix, and he described how they don't do any broadcast advertising, so that they don't want to be known as they've created a lot of their own content, a lot of their own movies and shows. They don't want to be known as the folks who do dystopian dark series. They want you to have an experience of Netflix, which is whatever you have identified with. So when you log on to Netflix and you're playing stuff, it identifies each individual in the family. You're choosing certain things, and then Netflix is feeding you what it learns you like and gives you more of that. So if you like a particular genre, then it's going to give you more of that genre. And so consumers, I think, are going to start to expect, and it will impact them in positive ways, that I'm getting this tailored, personalized experience. And that will, be the expectation. The Amazons and Netflix of the world, Google, are setting consumer expectations of personalization so that I don't, when I go to then another brand and I'm getting some customer experience, I'm going to expect them to know about me and then to personalize the experience to me. And if they're still doing average stuff where they don't show that they know me, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Well, that's a very good point. Although I will tell you, Brad, that on occasion, kind of freaks me out a little bit, the ad targeting. You happen to look at something somewhere on the web. Maybe I looked at a piece of jewelry. Next thing you know, I'm reading a Washington Post article, and all of a sudden something pops up for that brand. I'm certainly used to it because I'm a big fan of technology. But I will admit, every once in a while, I say, "Wait a second. Now, how do they know that so quickly about me?" It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that is as a concern today, at least in my industry, is a big concern today that everything's being filtered, and I'm seeing the same movies as people like me, or TV shows of people like me, or products for people like me, but not for people unlike me who I could probably afford to listen to once in a while. So I think that's just a caution that could rise up and have people, and it is rising up now, that we're just not listening to each other and what each other's points of view are. So maybe we have to hack into those patterns somehow to make sure we get both sides of the story.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, in the last few minutes that we have for the program, I'm going to want us to end by talking about some of those steps that you both recommend that organizations and individuals can take to prepare themselves. We've talked about some of that throughout the program, but depending on where people are coming into the conversation that we're having, I always think it's a good idea to kind of end with some concrete suggestions and thoughts from our guest experts.
I guess I'll start off. I think that some of the next steps are, like we discussed, is individuals taking responsibility to get additional training, learning as much as they can about AI. I think there's a responsibility for companies and organizations to develop a governance system of responsible practices when it comes to AI. We've seen that with a coalition of 5 companies that is doing that, and I think that's just fantastic and important that we really develop those responsible practices. And I thought I would add that, because I just read this really interesting statement or a story over the weekend, but saying that in Oakland, California, an organization is giving $20,000 per year to 1,000 people to see what they would do in that year without an income, because of all this discussion about people not being replaced and not having jobs, and what are they going to do with all that time, and how will their lives be? They're going to do this experiment, and I think it's just fascinating to think of being paid to reinvent, or what are you going to do for a whole year when your job's been displaced. So I think there's going to be a lot of creative and innovative next steps, and I think consumers are pretty much ready for it.
Interesting. So they're giving each person $20,000 a year to just live on that $20,000.
Yeah, and just to see You have all of a sudden, what would you do if you didn't have a job? Your job was displaced by AI.
That's really interesting.
Might not be enough, but it's the idea is fascinating.
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting because I know for myself, low debt, own my own car. I don't need a lot to live on, but I'm thinking, I don't know, how would I get by on $20,000? So it's interesting. I'll have to stay in touch with you to learn more about that. Now, you also mentioned that some of the things that you think are important. You said earlier, making sure that people are more knowledgeable, that they're educating themselves, thinking for themselves, finding the right trusted resources. Before I turn it back over to Brad, are there anything else that you think individuals need to be thinking about or doing to get themselves ready?
Yes, I firmly believe that we have to make sure that the wealth that's going to be developed from AI lands in as many people's hands as possible, and that we don't find ourselves with a 1% group of people who are benefiting and others are not losing their jobs and being replaced and so forth. So I think my hope would be that when companies come together and individuals, that we can think out to 2025 or whenever we really think AI is going to really impact society, that we're prepared to make sure that we don't leave people behind.
Now, Brad, what are some of your suggested thoughts as far as organizations and individuals? So now we're thinking about the businesses, but we're also thinking about the people who are employees in those businesses. What are some of the suggestions that you would offer?
Well, I think we've covered a lot about what it means to individual employees and their careers and what they need to do to move upstream or to work with the machines. Let's talk about what it might mean more from an enterprise, from an organization standpoint. So you're in healthcare, you're in manufacturing. What does it mean as an enterprise? You've got this disruption coming at you with new technology. Many companies now have taken on board firmly that they thought they had a franchise, they thought they were established. I make aircraft engines, and nobody's going to just sort of jump in and start making aircraft engines tomorrow because there are only 3 people and it takes, billions of dollars to create one of these things. And yet, all this technology is coming, and the companies that are making these very sophisticated technological products realize that somebody can come in and take the information around it. A company could come in and take all the data that comes off of that aircraft engine and make a business out of it and take all the margin, and you could get commoditized, even with that sophisticated a product. One of the key ideas is that the machines are going to continue to get smarter. The machines train themselves over time. They're going to get better and better. Once you put some process and you put it into software and you put machines on it, it's going to get better over time. It's going to improve. It's just the nature of that technology. People kind of get set in a way, and it's really hard to get people to change, but software can turn over in a heartbeat. And so let's just take the autonomous car as an example. Let's say Google started with its, the self-driving car, the autonomous car, let's say 5-10 years ago, and they're racking up miles, and the machines are getting better and better and better. And at some point, they hit an inflection point, and Elon Musk made this point about Tesla. It was a tragedy that someone was using the autonomous drive on a Tesla, and they get in an accident. But and as much of a tragedy as that is, we do not expect that the autonomous cars need to be better than that they have no crashes. Rather, it's that they're better than humans. And I just saw a news item, I think it was in yesterday's paper, about how auto insurance rates are going up because people are distracted, they're on their mobile devices, and there are more accidents. So humans aren't so good. There are a lot of accidents and a lot of deaths that are caused by humans driving, so all the machines have to do is hit an inflection point where they're better than humans. So once that happens, autonomous drive is the ethical, moral, important, better way to drive your car. You will be a bad person if you don't have an autonomous car, because maybe you're going to get in an accident. And when that happens, what does that do to the auto industry? What does that do to the manufacturers? If you aren't on that curve to the autonomous drive, you're going to be left behind. And once things get done in software, then the skills you need are different skills. And we could go on about the whole impact on the industry of mobility, of Uber, and the AI that it uses to get cars just to you when you need them. And so millennials don't need a car. They would just as soon have access to cars, so car as a service. So what does that do? It's a wake-up call for an industry that's been very much focused on creating cars, that maybe they need to be focused on data analytics and AI. And in fact, the auto companies are buying AI companies. So there's a whole lot of volatility as companies that used to compete on one basis, I can create great cars or airplanes, now have to compete with, I need to use analytics and AI in order to make my a complete package for my product. And I could tell similar stories in healthcare, where there are a lot of devices that can be attached to people, and then they can have health and wellness and fitness apps and monitors that can alert when things look like they might be going off the rails, predict when someone might need some care. In education, you have continuous learning, and maybe you have agents out looking for things that are going to educate you. So every industry, every company is being disrupted, and they can either choose to get on and get out ahead of these things, but in any case, they certainly need to make some choices. There were strategic choices they didn't have to make before.
Excellent. Well, we have had, as always, the time flies by. Brad and Leslie, you have both shared some really interesting insights about artificial intelligence, and I think it's been a great conversation. I want to let everybody know watching the webinar today that if you liked this session, Microsoft has many more on-demand programs that you might also like. Today I've been talking with Brad Power, who's the principal at Maxos, and Leslie Gaines-Ross, who's the Chief Reputation Strategist at Weber Shandwick. It's been a pleasure hosting the program. Here's how you can reach out and connect with Brad and Leslie directly. Feel free to chat with them about your thoughts about artificial intelligence and get to know more about the work that they do. Certainly, as the host of the programs, if you have any comments about the programs or if there are any topics you're interested in hearing more about, please connect with me, drop me an email. Love to hear your thoughts, and we'll take those things into consideration as we plan future programs. So Leslie and Brad, thank you so much for joining me today as my guest experts.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for attending today's session. Remember that Microsoft offers Dynamics 365 and a host of other business applications that support sales, marketing, service, operations, and they can help you be much more productive in this new world. And certainly Microsoft's doing some fairly cool things around artificial intelligence and machine learning as well. If you'd like to learn more, you can certainly visit the web at Microsoft.com. I'm Barb Giamanco. It's been my pleasure to host another session of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Applications Thought Leadership webinar series. I appreciate everybody joining, and until next time, watch for more episodes coming soon.